The combination of liver, onions, and bacon is one of the all-time classics in food. Some people object to the strong taste of beef liver, though, and so chicken liver is more palatable. The preparation here is more elegant than you usually see for this dish, and much more flavorful and complex. Like most of my recipes, it is arranged so that you can do most of the preparation far in advance and finish it off quickly on demand when orders are placed or when guests arrive.
Got slab bacon here that we're going to cut the lardons from. And it's 100 grams of relatively large cubes that I'm starting off in a cold pan, nothing else, no oil or anything, because they got plenty of fat in them as they are. Here's what it looks like 10 minutes later. I've got the heat on 4 out of 1 to 10. Cooking this very slowly. I want to render the fat out of this, and I want to get really beautiful lardons. And finally, after 20 minutes, we have some nice pieces here. I'm going to drain these on paper towel and store them over here for plating. Now on to the next task. I've assembled the ingredients. I've got 2 eggs, about 140 grams of shallots, which I'm going to chop up coarsely before I put them into the blenders to help the blender out a little bit. I've got the mixture of seasonings. I got half a teaspoon of cumin, quarter teaspoon of cayenne pepper, half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of baking soda. That's soda, not powder. We're going to add the baking powder later. The butter, this is actually all the butter. Half of it goes in now, the other half we're going to use for later. And the cream. The shallots cut up in the blender. There's the egg yolks, all the spices, and baking soda, the cream, and the butter. I measured that half. And once it's smooth, I'm going to transfer it to a bowl. And I've added 150 grams of flour, and on top of that I'm going to put 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder. Now it's baking powder. And we're going to fold this together gently. We're not looking to blend this real hard. We want to fold the mixture together until it's consistent, but we're not trying to beat it in together so that we develop gluten. And after maybe a minute, less than a minute really, you've got a homogeneous mixture here. Now I'm just going to let this stand at room temperature for a few minutes while I grease the pan this is going to cook in and preheat the oven. We just let this sit and the flour hydrate a little bit first using a ceramic baking dish here. And I'm going to coat this with butter. Be fairly generous. You do not want any places where the butter did not contact this. The batter will stick if you don't get it buttered and floured properly. Okay. Then you just tap it around to make sure that it's completely evenly coated. And now we transfer the batter to the pan here. Okay, if there's a tiny bit of unevenness on the top, don't worry about it, because when it gets in the hot oven, this melt down, it'll be flat anyway. Now I'm just going to leave it sit like this in the dish until the oven finishes preheating. So from the point that I finished folding the flour in to where it actually goes in the oven, it's going to be about 10 minutes. So it's sat for about 10 minutes letting the flour hydrate. And here's what it looks like after it comes out of the oven. You can see it's really risen up in the middle here. That's fine, because what we're going to do is we're going to clean this up. We're going to use the top part for the crumb and the bottom part for the kind of croutons. You'll see. And after a few minutes, you transfer it to a wire rack to cool down the rest of the way. And if we were making a cake or a loaf of bread, this kind of a rice pattern would be quite bad. But we're not making a cake or a loaf of bread. We're making something else completely. In fact, we're making 2 different things completely. So I'm going to remove the top of this. This is going to get ground up and used as the crumb, as you'll see. And the rest of this, we're going to trim off the edges too. We don't have crusts on it. And that can also get tossed into the food processor. We're going to have more crumb than we can possibly use here, but that's okay. Okay. Now this gets stored off to the side on a plate somewhere, and next we use this. Now all of that trim goes into the food processor, all the crust, and it gets ground. And this is what we get from the crust part. These fine, soft breadcrumbs that are intensely shallot flavored. Now put this aside. We make the next component for this. The next thing I did is I took some of this crumb that we made earlier and I put it into a flat sheet. We're gonna use this separately for something else in a few minutes when we're closer to the end. Now we're gonna use this. Now, while the oven is preheating again, it's also to 180 degrees the second time, you're going to go through these livers and remove the connective membrane. You want to do a careful job of this. Kind of work your knife along it, because the cleaner you do this, the nicer tasting the final product will be. Just put them into a bowl for now and work your way through all of the livers that you're going to do. Of course, the exact number will depend on how many portions you're making of this at one time. You have to do these fresh. We've got the livers here. I'm going to dry them off one at a time. Unlike a regular breading operation, this is much lighter. So add a little bit of salt, touch of ground black pepper. Make sure it's dry. Then it's going to go into melted butter. And the crumb. That's it. No flour, no heavy coating. Now it goes into the tray, onto the silpat. And you begin lining it on the silpat, covered baking tray like this, and while the oven's still preheating, and go through the rest of them, line them up. I used half the crumb mixture. I got enough for 8 chicken livers. This is going to go in the oven first for 11 minutes. Now we have the bottom piece of this cake that we made, and by the way, in case it wasn't clear, I also trimmed off the bottom crust from it. I'm going to cut this in half just to make it a little bit easier to work with. Now it's going to go into, this is just beaten egg, that's all it is, and we're just going to put it on one side, and we're going to press it into this crumb mixture. We do the same thing with the other half. Press it into the extra crumb mixture here. This is what we're going to get out of it. So we get this kind of textured surface here. This is going to get fried now in olive oil in just a moment here. And it's cooking at a gentle sizzle here. And you have to watch it carefully, because it will go from being nicely toasty on one side to being burned on one side fairly quickly. So pay attention to it. Every once in a while, kind of lift it up, take a look. Okay, needs more. When you've got it golden on the crumb side down, flip it over, cook it a little bit on the back side, and then transfer it over some paper towels to drain. And let these cool down, and then we're going to slice them into pieces and strips to use. Time went up after 11 minutes. I've taken the chicken livers and I've turned each one of them over on the silpat. Now they go back into the oven for the remaining time. This is a crucial step. Just before you're finally ready to plate it up, you're going to give these strips of bread the final fry in olive oil on both sides to make them crisp. You need to make them crisp. And then you're going to toss the cooked livers into the pan along with the bacon that you're going to use in that, and warm it all through. But these have to be crisp. If they're not, the whole thing falls apart. And then the final touch for some little bit of glisten and sheen and acid. Just put a little bit of vinaigrette over the top. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.